Hello and welcome to the Give Me the Remote podcast, episode 19. It is the 6th of November 2018. We've been on a little bit of a hiatus because Sheridan's been lazy. My name is John and the lazy Sheridan is joining me in the pod.
Oh, this is going to be such an enjoyable podcast with you.
It's going to be great. The audience are going to love it.
Passive aggression start.
Just getting it out of our system. So, what have we got, Sheridan?
Let's start with Making a Murderer Season 2.
Are you going to say hello to the audience?
Well...
Because they want to know you care.
I thought we were just launching straight into insults.
But not the audience, we love them.
Hello, audience.
Sheridan neglects you too. So, Making a Murderer Season 2. Making a Murderer, really the birth of true crime in the television format, at least in the modern era.
I'm going to say rebirth of true crime in the television format.
Yeah, but the idea of these documentaries...
It was certainly a big one.
And for most people, it was the first one they watched.
For a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they might have listened to Serial as a podcast, but...
And, yeah, a lot of people that weren't into true crime watched it.
Yeah. And now we watch any old documentary that promises behind the scenes to a trial. So first season of Making a Murderer, it had twists, it had turns, it had the unexpected. And because you were watching it without having any real need to research it and it wasn't news, it was all surprising.
Yeah.
And Making a Murderer Season 2, any big news in the case is on every news channel.
That's true.
Anyway. So...
Although, I was pretty into Season 1, and, I mean, I had known about the Brendan Dassey appeals, but I hadn't known about Stephen Avery hiring this apparently quite well-known post-conviction lawyer, Kathleen
So this is
Zellner.
Season 2?
Yeah, in Season 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was still some surprises for me with
But
Season 2.
nothing actually happened with Stephen. I mean, spoilers. I think it's fair to say nothing happens in this season.
I think it's fair to say we can probably give a spoiler because, like you said, if Stephen Avery was out, you would have heard about it.
Yeah. Which is the problem they've got with the narrative in general. The other problem I'd have is that the Kathleen Zellner, did we say? Or
yeah.
It's half of the season is just an ad for her.
So one thing that they don't actually really explore is she clearly did not give a flying whatever about Stephen Avery until Making a Murderer aired on Netflix. They had been writing to her, asking her to review his case.
Yeah, right.
And then it blew up, and what do you know? There she is. And she has... This series, this is my main problem with this series, is that it is an ad for her. And, I mean, she is obviously a very good lawyer, and she is quite charismatic on the screen, and I didn't mind watching her, but there's too much airtime spent on her talking about how amazing she is.
What I object to is, I don't mind watching an ad for her if it's her doing amazing things, but there's very little of her doing amazing things. There's a whole lot of her just talking to the screen about how brilliant she thinks she is.
Yeah, and also, what about... So Brendan Dassey also has these lawyers that are much more kind of earnest, and definitely one of them appears to be...
University law school professors,
quite
fundamentally.
Junior, or much more junior, definitely, than Zellner. She gives some oral submissions in the Seventh Circuit Court in America, which I think would be like basically equivalent to the full federal court in Australia.
Very much so, yeah.
And Zellner just throws her under the bus after her, just completely rips into how inadequate she was, and it was just a bit harsh.
That was one of the very few entertaining moments in the season, I found, though. I mean, there were so many moments where you and I both thought, what's going on? I don't know.
I think the problem is... especially for Australians, perhaps, but I suspect for a lot of Americans, the world of the appellate courts in the criminal jurisdiction in the US is pretty boring.
It's really boring. It's intended to be boring.
Yeah, there's no...
Very little can happen.
There's no cameras in the courts, so you kind of left... They do it quite well. They do... Because there's audio recording in their courts over there. Yeah. We don't have that. But that's available to the public.
There must be... Yeah, I was going to say... Recording, but yeah.
Yeah, you can't get it, but you can in the US. They do these animations, and it works pretty well.
When you say animation, it's mostly just a drawing that they move the camera around.
It's a high-tech court reporter drawing. Yeah, I think it works okay.
It's okay, but...
But, you know, they're giving submissions on... I mean, there's a lot of, like, they talk about these Brady Convention, which is a convention of withholding evidence from the defense. Complicated legal concepts that just aren't as cool as watching, like, that douchebag Kratz prosecutor in the first one.
Yeah, I just think there's basically only 2 episodes of material here, and then they've just padded it. If it had just been 2 episodes of Making a Murderer Revisited, it could have been great, because there is some really interesting stuff. Avery's lawyer does do some clever stuff with evidence that no one had done before in terms of thinking things backwards and thinking them from other sides.
Well, this is actually my second problem with the show, though, is there's a lot of time spent on them doing these recreations.
That I'm less interested in, but yeah.
Which to me lack any forensic utility. I mean, they're recreating them
throwing
the body into the back of the truck. Yeah. I mean, and like driving around over 10 years after the crime was committed. I mean, wouldn't the roads have changed? And
there is. I think it can still give some guidance.
I accept that might be part of their process, but it's not going to get him off. There's no way that's going to get him off.
No, it's not admissible in court.
And so it just seems
doing your little home experiments is never admissible in any court.
It seems like it's just being done for Netflix, and I don't want to watch that.
Yeah.
And I think this is...
They're just trying to pad too much.
Well, this is the problem with a lot of Netflix shows, though. They pad a lot. Like, they seem to need to get to this 10-episode minimum. Why do they have to do that?
Sometimes they've only got 6 episodes worth of stuff.
There's definitely only about 5 or 6 episodes worth of stuff. I mean, there is some cracker...
You think there's 5 or 6 episodes in this one? Because like I said, I think they could have done it too.
There was some cracker moments, though, with the girlfriends.
I thought it was more voyeuristic than insightful to the case, but
this is all you kind of have now on this show. And also, one of the other problems...
I think Dr. Phil is highly unethical in the way he's treated Stephen Avery and his girlfriends on his show.
Yeah.
I think Dr.
Who knew? Dr. Phil's responsible for Stephen Avery being dumped twice. But one of the things that this doesn't really also do is it doesn't interrogate what the original series did for Stephen Avery. They're kind of in this. They play these actors where they're not famous.
Yeah.
But they're extremely famous now. Like Stephen Avery would be the most well-known
felon in the American prison
apparently
system.
Innocent.
Probably the world.
Yeah, at the moment he would be.
Yeah.
And my other thing is, I'm not actually necessarily sure that he is innocent. I mean, I think what happened in his trial and the investigation was... in the investigation was wrong. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's some evidence that they left out.
I think the whole point about Stephen Avery in both series is Stephen Avery is not an ideal human being. He's not even a nice guy at all. You would not invite Stephen Avery around to dinner if you had any choice in the matter.
Oh, you definitely would not.
No.
Or maybe you would now.
Well, you would now because it'd be interesting. All your friends would want to come around to have a look at him, but it'd be a sort of a zoo display kind of thing. The issue has never been whether Stephen Avery is a nice person. The question has always been whether Stephen Avery is actually guilty of the horrible things he's been accused of.
That's right, but I think the problem with this series is because there's not much else there.
And he's just sitting in prison, he can't hurt
You spend quite a bit of time thinking, well, actually, you know what, this guy is actually pretty awful. I don't know if I really care that he's in prison anymore, and I think maybe he might have done it, and I'm not too worried about it. I'm not saying I think that, but I think that I definitely thought that at times watching this.
Look, I haven't spent a lot of time in small town America, but I've spent a bit of time in small town America. And the mendacity that goes on at county level and can go on at county level, I think it concerns a lot of people, and I think that's part of the appeal there. I have to say, though, Manitou County... all the aerial shots they do around it, it looks like a beautifully put together little municipality.
I think they filmed it at a good time of year.
Yeah, except for the Avery junkyard at the edge of town, which lets the team down. You can understand why the locals with their beautifully manicured city would be like, oh, we can't stand these yokels. And I think some elements of justice, like the way the state keeps banging on about, oh, we demand justice for the Halbach family, which is the not original victim, the second victim, alleged victim of Stephen Avery. It's a bit like in Australia when the government does horrible things to people and then insists on respecting their privacy by not letting the media know what the horrible things they've done to them. There's...
I know. I mean, you do have to feel some sympathy for them, though, because...
For the Halbachs or the state?
For the Halbachs. They would have been asked to be interviewed for this show and said no.
Oh, they hate the show because they think Avery done it, yeah.
Yeah, but, even if they didn't think that he did it, they've been dragged into this reality that they wouldn't have wanted to live.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I do have some sympathy for the Avery clan view that the greatest justice that could be done for the Halbachs would be to find the real killer. And I think for all his failings, I don't, and this is part of the fun of the show, at least since season 1, did Stephen actually do it?
I think it's a possibility he did do it.
Oh, it's a possibility. I just don't think the balance of probabilities points that way at all. But
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, sure.
And they come up with some really fanciful conspiracy alternate theories that is just actually makes me think. That's actually what makes me think more like, no, I think this guy did do it.
When you're in a situation where evidence has obviously been tampered with to the levels that it has, there is some conspiracy running somewhere, and who was conspiring and who did what. But the county had a huge motive with the lawsuit he had pending against them when he was charged. It just comes back to follow the money as far as I'm concerned. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously. All right, well, what are you going to give it?
Season 1, I think, is about a 4-star offering. For comparison, I think this is 1.5 stars.
1.5 stars, wow.
Yeah. I thought it was basically a waste of my time.
Look, I'm going to go with 2 stars, only because I think there is some interest there and there are some good episodes. In fact, the best episodes are probably the last 2 episodes. And maybe the first 2.
Too much isn't the lawyer brilliant stuff.
Yeah, but you haven't... If you'd skipped right through that, you wouldn't have seen so much of it.
Like I said, I think they could have made 2 cracker episodes that would have been riveting entertainment, but instead they just...
Well, the fact that Zelna's face doesn't move while she talks either is somewhat disturbing after a while.
Okay.
Well, she's clearly had a lot of Botox.
All right, then. So what's next?
The Bodyguard. Not the Whitney Houston, Kevin Costner version.
No, which got us in trouble with what would have been one of our guests.
Well, because lots of people were saying to us, why are you watching The Bodyguard on a Saturday night? They thought we were some real saddos.
And they were right. So this is Rob Stark having an unexpected outing as
not Rob Stark, the dude that plays Rob Stark.
He looks a lot like Rob Stark, especially when he's looking confused and pained. He's only really got a couple of notes as an actor. Yeah. Okay, so he's what they call in this country close personal protection. I think they call them that in the UK as well. But basically a policeman who acts as a bodyguard for politicians.
Yeah.
And
he's a returned soldier as well.
Yes, so he's a returned serviceman who's had a traumatic tour of Afghanistan and has somehow been cleared to do CPP work, having been recruited into the Met, which is separate recruitment. That's straining credibility, actually.
Oh, there's a lot of credibility problems, but I don't think we're looking for realism necessarily.
Not necessarily.
He's troubled. He's single.
He's single.
He's separated from his wife and kids. Got an alcohol problem. He lives in a dingy flat in London.
That's quite nice.
The flat?
Yeah.
The flat's very dark and very sterile.
Yeah. I don't know, it does look perfect for a single man. Not cluttered with things.
It looks like he's rented a fully furnished apartment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. It's great. So he gets caught up in a string of events, and as you watch it as an audience member unfolding, parts of it are like, how could one person have these things happen to him? And then, as particularly in the final episode of the story unfolding, we're not going to spoil it. Some things make more sense because you finally understood all the factors that were at play, and that's part of the brilliance of it. And I would say it's brilliant. Sort of tipping my hand there. Having said that, there are moments that go beyond straining credibility to the completely ludicrous, so it's not without its flaws.
Well, he's a bit Jack Bauer-esque. So he's doing it. So there's a conspiracy. And we won't give away.
There are multiple conspiracies.
There's multiple conspiracies, but a murder terrorist conspiracy.
Yeah, there are multiple contending powers forcing against each other,
But
and he gets caught in the middle of it.
He's the investigator. He's the guy saving people. He's taken down terrorists. He's doing so many different things.
Well, I would say for me that the moment where it got its most ludicrous was when, and this is reasonably early, so I'm going to excuse myself and say it's not too spoilery. He's in a car with the Home Secretary, and a sniper is shooting at the car, and he jumps out of the car, grabs a submachine gun that happens to be in the car. Not very realistic in the UK, I don't think. Puts a policeman's hat on and storms the building that he thinks the sniper's in. Now, I did actually talk to a person who shall remain nameless who does CPP work in this country, and apparently one of the adages of the CPP is you put maximum effort on the principal and minimal effort on the threat. And he was completely.
Well, of course you would be. You'd just be taking the person away from the threat, and he just drives literally into the threat and then runs up the building. And...
He was making it harder for a sniper to target the car by doing that bit, but getting out of the car and leaving the principal on the street while he goes up. He doesn't know if there's not other players.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But having said this, it was quite fun. It was a nice little tense little action scene.
Yeah.
With, not actually a massive budget. Which is typical in that kind of UK BBC. I don't know.
What made TV? BBC, although you'd almost say early Game of Thrones, they didn't do much in the way of big set piece action. They just sort of hinted at it. And,
I think Game of Thrones has got a bigger budget than Bodyguard.
Yeah.
No, I think it did in season 1.
But you can do a lot by hinting at action off screen as well, and they do a good job with that. There's lots of people shouting at people. There's some interesting romantic notes. Apparently it was rated.
I think there might be some Ed Stark butt scenes.
Rob Stark. Unless you're saying Sean Bean's hidden in here somewhere.
No.
Just get his head shot off.
Something in there for
the
ladies and gents that are inclined.
And a Home Secretary playing with herself. That's not something we've ever seen on television.
That's true. That is true.
So, look, it's... but despite the odd moment of silliness, which is slightly annoying because it was so good and all the rest, they didn't even need to do that. I get that the writers needed to make a certain setup that scene required, and it's just disappointing they couldn't think of a better way to get to it.
Yeah.
But I think it echoed for me a lot. We were talking about Edge of Darkness a few podcasts ago, and the original BBC Edge of Darkness was a similar sort of thing where you had your everyman, and everyman policeman is particularly handy because they do have access to certain levers of power, and they can look up databases and they can call people and find out things. So it always tends to be a police person at the heart of these things. But there's contending powers at play. I mean, there's just a horrifically well done scene where a senior person in the police wants our hero to do something and he doesn't want to do, and he says, "I'm not going to do that." And they just look at him and say, "Well, that's a real shame because I have to make an assessment on whether your family can stay in the safe house any longer." Just that exercise of power.
There's some good tense... There's both good action scenes and good storytelling and tensions created.
Yeah.
So what are you going to give it?
4.5 stars.
I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Okay.
Well, I don't do the halves, so...
Don't do the halves.
I feel as though that one of us is going to have to renege on that soon because it's leading for inconsistent ratings.
I would say it's great TV and it's well worth watching, and I highly recommend it. I'm just slightly disappointed that they got so far into making something so great and then just let a few moments of not even lazy writing, but just they couldn't resolve some internal inconsistencies, and that's a shame.
I think the problem with the binge watching is that those moments too are really, really apparent when you're binge watching. Because if you have 2 episodes in a row that don't hit the mark, and you've watched 3 or 4 episodes in a row, you start to lag a bit. Whereas, in the old serialized week to week, you're kind of watching one and you might go, oh, this week's wasn't that good. And then but you'll go back next week and it won't stay there as...
I hear what you're saying, but I would also say that if you're watching one a week and you get 2 dud episodes, you've gone by the 4 weeks without having a good episode at the end of that.
Yeah, true.
So I think that can cut either way. I was quite happy watching it in a big binge. Yeah, all right. So what's next?
First Purge.
So a new Purge movie, but a prequel.
If anyone's not familiar with the Purge series, I'd highly recommend getting yourself onto whatever service you're on and just checking them out. So basically it's premised on a system of government that... Well, actually, it's a... I'm not explaining myself...
It's a dystopian near future.
Yes, and the current government has a system for managing crime whereby they allow once a year...
An ostensible system, I would say, but go on.
For anyone to commit any illegal act they want. So I think there are some restrictions. I don't think you're allowed to use weapons of mass destruction. I think this is discussed in one of them, but anyway, I'm getting into the detail. Obviously, I really like the Purge movies. So you can basically go out and kill people, commit, robberies, looting, do whatever you want.
See, I would say it's actually a system of social control via fear, and as such, it's part of a slightly heavy-handed but very realistic social commentary on modern politics.
Yes. But aside from all that, it's just like kind of a movie where...
It's a slasher films as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's lots of mayhem and people just doing horrible things to each
dressed
other.
up in crazy outfits. And...
Yeah, I mean, parts of it look like being at a burn. In that there's, crazy outfits and lots of EDM.
Like a festival.
Yeah, okay, any festival. But yeah, good costumes, yeah.
So this one's a prequel. So this is the First Purge, like the title suggests.
The movie's called The First Purge. It's the 4th movie in the series?
It's the 4th movie. So it's the only one that hasn't been directed by James DeMarco, who wrote and directed all the others, but he wrote this one.
Oh, good for him. That's probably a good step back.
And it is a pretty much predominantly black cast. Which is, I don't know if that's worthy of comment, but...
Oh, it's very obvious that the white people are bad guys in this.
Yeah.
Or bad people.
So they're on Staten Island.
The movie's set on Staten Island,
And so the First Purge occurs only within the confines of Staten Island. And there's definitely a lot of political commentary on why people that live on Staten Island are chosen as the guinea pigs for this first test by white people in power. So it's quite topical and relevant. So there is some political stuff in there, but there's also just your usual Purge drama.
I would say Rick and Morty have also done a very good parody of the Purge as well.
Yes, they did. There's been quite a few Purge parodies because definitely the first one is very good. I think actually all of them are good. I like them all.
Yeah. No, I think the Purge movies are one of those things that you think, if you haven't come at them yet, you'll be like, oh, it's just this schlocky, violent movie, some sort of subgrade Saw or something like that. But they're not, because their political messaging is actually much more thoughtful than... A bit like Planet of the Apes, I'd actually say, which was probably a movie in a similar calibre back when it was made in the 70s, which also had a much more interesting political message hidden in the subtext.
I think maybe the problem with this one compared to the others is if you're looking at a future reality that's not similar to the today. It is often, I think, more believable if you're just dropped into that reality and it's fully formed.
Yep.
Whereas this is trying to explain how it formed, and there's some aspects of that are quite believable, but then there's other aspects of it that aren't, and I think maybe a bit of that might be to do with some of the crappy acting and how the leaders of what are the political First Fathers? New Founding Fathers is the political party in power. They're portrayed in quite a cheesy way.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of a problem, if this movie has some problems, it's a good movie, but it has problems, is that the other Purge movies, there's always an element of hope. There's an element that the good guys might make it through the night, or in the later ones that they might make some political change to make the world a better place. Whereas in this one, because it's a prequel, everything gets darker from here.
Yeah.
So there's less hope.
There is some positives though. So there's the two main characters. That one of the main characters is a drug dealer, Dimitri, and watching his sort of process at realizing that he's quite a powerful person who's a leader, and he has a lot to offer. Watching that's quite positive.
Yeah.
As much as you can get into these kinds of themes of what is essentially a schlock movie.
But fundamentally, we know, because we've seen the other movies, that the purges are going to become more widespread and go on, and that they are essentially just a way for the ruling class to wreak retribution on lower class people who displease them.
Yes.
For all that it's phrased as an opportunity for everyone to have their fun. And also to say that we're all bad. I think that's a big part of the thesis of the New Founding Fathers with the Purges. You've all got dark hearts, dark souls. You deserve what you're going to get.
I think actually too, maybe what makes this one a little bit more, distasteful is that there's not a lot of people the only people that seem to be enjoying the mayhem are actually legit crazy people. Whereas in the earlier Purge movies, there's a lot of people that, spend their normal day-to-day lives being quite normal and law-abiding citizens, and then they just break out on Purge night.
As if it's
there's not a lot of
there's
not a lot of that going on in this one, which is actually probably why it's a little bit disturbing given our current political climate. But I'm going to give it 3 stars, but I'm going to caveat that with I don't think you would probably enjoy this film that much if you hadn't seen the other Purges.
I think you need to watch the Purges in the order they were made.
Yeah, I agree.
It'd be a bit like watching Star Wars prequels before A New Hope. You'd end up terribly lost.
Yeah, or just perhaps by the last one you'd just be very depressed.
Well, yeah, that's true. Everyone dies.
Oh God, they keep dying. When does the Purge end?
Babies. Thank you for asking. I think I'm on 3.5 stars for this one.
Good. Good, I like it. I did ask you, didn't I? Oh well, I'm sure you're not too much of a wallflower and capable of speaking up for yourself there, John. All right, I think that's it for the week.
Okay, are you gonna do the talk out, or I'll take care of that?
I can't remember our email address.
So, folks, if you'd like to drop us a line, suggest some shows, there are our social media channels, which you probably found this podcast through, or email gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. And also a big hello to our burgeoning YouTube listeners, particularly our friend suggesting that early Joan Rivers was...
oh, yes.
Yes, and we appreciate...
We didn't see a lot of Joan Rivers, I don't think, in Australia on TV.
Yeah, this was referring to Marvellous Miss Maisel.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just
Sheridan
saying...
didn't think that comedy existed in that era, and our listener thinks that early Joan Rivers might have been.
Well, and I have seen early Joan Rivers, but she, sort of escaped my mind, but she's not a comic that is ingrained in the Australian mindset, I don't think.
That's a good excuse. Let's go with that.
Well, because I've been predominantly, we know her as the woman that did the E! fashion reviews.
Yeah, although she only got into that position because of her years of stand-up comic.
I agree, but like we didn't watch her stand up on TV.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for listening so far. We will endeavour to be back next week. We got some other things to talk about. So, thanks for listening, and we'll be in your ears soon.